it gained him a very big following. He became a figure of a view of the new possibilities of social order. He became such an important figure that Mahatma Gandhi went to his estate to talk to him. Rilke, the great German poet, went to his estate to talk to him. All kinds of people went and visited him at his estate. He became a great, great figure. An equivalent now of this kind of person. He was, as a kind of moral authority in 1895, 1900, he was like the Dalai Lama today, among the intellectual and the learned, all over Europe, because he had the same sort of principles, right? Nonviolent resistance to evil, nonviolent overcoming of violence, compassion, kindness, non-materialistic ordering of society. He was, and of course he was living during the revolution. He was observing the overthrow of the Tsarist regime. He was very unsympathetic to the revolutionaries because he thought they would simply replace one oppressive regime with another, and he wasn't interested in that. So that's sort of the scope of his life. At the end of his life, he left his estate in the very last weeks of his life and wandered off with a group of mendicant, which means begging, monks, Russian Orthodox monks, and ended up in a train station where he was stricken and where it was clear that he was dying. Camera crews flooded the train station. Newspapermen surrounded the train station. It was like the death of the Pope. They were there for, a couple of days watching Tolstoy die and writing down anything that he said. It was 1910. So one doesn't think of Tolstoy as 1910, right? One thinks of him as somehow lost in the 19th century. But Tolstoy is 1910. There are movies in 1910, 80 plus. So there he is, dying in this place, and it's, CNN is there all day. That's how famous, that's how influential, that's how esteemed he was. If you're curious about it, there's a very good novel by a guy named J. Perini called The Last Station, which was made into a film that came out, I guess, a year and a half ago, with Helen Mirren as Tolstoy's wife and Christopher Plummer as Tolstoy. And it tells the story of the last year or so of Tolstoy's life and the marriage with his wife and how things were pushing toward that extreme or most radical stance of Tolstoy's when he actually left his house and wandered as a sort of holy fool in the forest with these people. So that's the arc of his life. This story comes 1884 to 1886. He dies in 1910. So he's just started the religious publications. He's just started the moral teaching stuff. And he's just revised his notion of what art should be, right? And for him, it's very clear. Art should convey the emotions of one person to another person in an absolutely clear and direct fashion. And those emotions should indicate something about the value of life and how to experience it fully. So there's a teaching component for Tolstoy. There's always a teaching component about art, right? If you're gonna have somebody else's feelings, why would you do that, right? So that something would happen in your life that wouldn't happen otherwise. Okay, so far so good. From Tolstoy's point of view, what's got to happen? If you're going to have feelings, what happens when you have your own feelings? You pay attention to why you're having the feelings. You pay attention to what made that happen to you, right? Your feelings indicate to you that something important has happened to you and that it's either very good or very bad or interesting or scary or whatever it is. But you pay attention to it. Your feelings are a way of your life telling you pay attention. right? Tolstoy regarded them that way. So if art is going to do that, it's going to have to be telling you pay attention to something that counts. So that's what he became very interested in, writing stories about the feelings people have when something important is happening to them. And so thereby educating his audience once he could do that for them, right? In addition to giving them some sort of way to have more of their own life as well. Right? And that was part of his way of creating a new social order. It was part of the way of spreading the word.
Professor, how do his questions and answers add value to someone's life today?
The same way they did then. Because he's not, he's writing about what I first thought that student at Berkeley meant when she said awesome. Right? He's writing about life, death, love, childbirth.
Feelings, emotions.
Yeah, feelings and emotions that come out of the basic experiences of life. Somebody once asked T.S. Eliot, the American poet, what he thought were the fit subjects to write about. Right? Because he's one of these serious, important, only write about the big stuff guys. Right? Eliot's answer was, there are only 3 topics: birth, copulation, and death. Those are the things people care about, are excited about. Those are the things that are life, right? That's this life story, right? Birth, and then you do something about birth, right? And then you die. That's how life moves through you. And Eliot is interested in life itself as the most important subject to write about. Not what kind of job you have. Not what kind of relationships you have with other people, but how you experience the fact that you are alive, or the fact that life is calling on you to procreate, or the fact that life is leaving you. Those are the 3 topics. Now, Eliot didn't just make that up, right? That's from the Bible, that's the Tao, that's all the great religions are preoccupied with this actual thing, right? What actually happens to us? How do we in fact feel? How do we experience the beginning, the recreation of, and the end of the fact that we are alive? This is the great subject for the big artists, right? And Tolstoy, of course, that's what he's up to. So, is that relevant today? I think the fact that you are alive is probably always relevant. I think it's a relevant issue. The death of Ivan Ilyich is a story about somebody who got the fact that he was alive wrong. Just got it wrong. And he gets a chance to get it right in the story. But it's difficult, and it's painful. And he almost misses his chance.
But why was it wrong?
There you go. Let's see if we can... You didn't get what was wrong about his life.
Well, I thought he had an okay life. I thought he seemed to be okay.
Sure,
I mean,
sure.
the life we all wanted, it didn't seem like a bad life.
Right. Let's... It doesn't seem like a bad life.
I mean, he wasn't evil. He wasn't cheating anybody.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't doing anything that was corrupt.
But he was not happy. He was
He wasn't happy with himself.
Okay, so here's Cheryl's observation, which is perfectly correct.
In my opinion.
No, it's perfectly correct. What you're saying is perfectly, the story says, no, everybody should see this exactly as you see it because you are reading the story correctly. The story says what you're saying. The story says this is not a wicked person. This is not a malicious person. This is not a corrupt person. This is actually a successful, accomplished, ordinary person. Right? So remember that sentence early in the story. His life was very ordinary and very terrible.
He was a lawyer, he was a judge.
He was a judge. But we want to come back to this part of it. We've got two standards of judgment in that sentence, right? His life was very ordinary, and then Tolstoy goes on and finishes the sentence, and very terrible. Now, terrible there means scary. Scary. There is something about being ordinary, the way Ivan Ilyich is ordinary, which Tolstoy calls.
You base your decisions on what society wants.
Well, there was a whole lot of stuff about that. Mike, you had your hand up. Is it Mike or Michael?
Yeah, it's either.
Okay.
But kind of jumping into maybe a parallel. I didn't get to read the whole story in entirety. I just found out about that. But,
Keep going. You'll like it.
yeah, I'm gonna finish it when I get home.
Yeah.
But maybe just that was interesting what we were just talking about. But before it was more of what you said about him. He had a choice at the end. He almost missed his choice. Was that about him dying with dignity, or?
Wonderful, interesting phrase. Yeah.
Because I was thinking kind of the parallel that I was seeing when you told the life story of the author, and in this book, is he sees that you almost have to do something great or exceed expectations of others within your life to make it other than ordinary, and maybe that's the struggle you're more talking about now.
That's one way. The way you're mentioning, to have a great achievement in your life, that's the standard for the classical Greeks and the classical Romans.
But he was more
But that's right.
The author.
That's right. He's an intellectual, and he's a Russian Orthodox guy. And he, of course, knows the classics very well, because in his class, in the nobility, of course, he was educated in Greek and Latin. He knew all that stuff. From the point of view of the classical philosophers, there are various ways to overcome the horror that death renders your life meaningless. One is to do something so great that you won't die. Legacy. You're not dead. Homer's not dead. Cicero's not dead. Julius Caesar's not dead. It's all of that. So achievement, accomplishment, being excellent, being famous, right? That's one way. Another way is to take a certain stance, have a certain attitude toward your life. This is preached by the Stoics, right? To not regard your ego as so significant. To not regard the fact of your existence as especially important, right? Which is the opposite stance. Why would you want to continue one petal on one rose forever? The rose isn't any particular bloom. The rose is all the blooms that have ever bloomed and will ever bloom on all the rose plants. So this particular rose, you're going to put it in a case and bow down before it. It's crazy, right? So that attitude, is something like that is behind the Stoic notion. The Christian notion is different from the classical notion, right? The Christian notion about death is that it is a developmental process. It's a developmental process. It's a next step process.
The better step.
It's the better step. It's a kind of birth. So they're Christians who, now that doesn't mean Christians in fact believe this, or that Christianity has ever actually endorsed the view, or that Christian people have behaved as if they believed it, but it is the doctrine. It offers a different view. It offers a different possibility. It offers a different hope. Tolstoy, of course, is fascinated with this problem of the soul, the afterlife, eternity, the nature of consciousness. Does it persist when you're dead, and all the rest of it? He eventually gave up on all kinds of knowledge that could be described as metaphysical or supernatural. But he preserved part of the Christian idea about death not disqualifying life? This, of course, is the great challenge, right?